Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game Esoteric and our continuing series on the Sega STV or Sega Titan video arcade board. And today we're taking a look at steep slope sliders. That's really a mouthful to say. And this is developed by Cave, the same people that make the bullet hell shmups. That's right, Cave, the bullet hell shmup kings, made a snowboarding game for the Sega Saturn and the STV, and it is a good one. Before we get too far involved though, do me a huge favor, go down below, hit like, subscribe, and that notification bell definitely helps us out. If you feel so inclined and want to support the channel, we have a Patreon link in the description below as well. But I remember playing this game on my original Sega Saturn back in the day because it was quite cheap to buy, and I absolutely fell in love with it. I know we had cool borders on the Sony PlayStation, but for me, I always felt like Steep Slope Sliders was the better snowboarding game. Now granted, I cannot snowboard to save my life, but when it comes to skiing, another very similar winter activity, I am absurdly good at it. If you don't know my history, watch some old videos, but I worked for a long time in the skiing industry and I've coached at events such as the X Games. But outside of all that fun, random facts of knowledge, I love Steep Slope Sliders. I not only love it as a game that is super fun, but I love the fact that Cave made it. It's one of those games in the roster that you see their name pop up and you're like, wait, am I thinking of the same person that made something like Death Smiles? And you are correct. These are the same people, and they rarely if ever work in 3D, which makes it even more interesting. But mechanically, this game is one that's very easy to pick up and play, but becomes quite difficult to master completely because you really need to identify the best line to take down the mountain. Now, because this was an arcade game, it does work in an 8-direction configuration, but they have done an amazing job making this game feel like it's controlling with an analog stick, when in reality it is not whatsoever. Though I'm not really sure how that final jump, you pop your head right into that billboard. That's probably a bad design decision from a skiing or snowboarding standpoint. But this is why I love this game so much. It is just fun to play. Playing it gives me so much joy because it reminds me of being a kid in the 90s and buying this for like $10 used. That I think Blockbuster Video had a Sega Saturn sale when the games were going out of stock as the system had been basically discontinued. And this is just like being a kid again. It's such a fun game to play, and it's a fun game to replay because all you're really doing is competing against your high score. Basically how the game works is you need to have so many points by the time you get to the bottom of the mountain to qualify, and you need to get to the bottom of the mountain before that timer runs out. So in some ways it feels like a racing game, and in some ways it feels like a snowboarding trick game. And the way the tricks work is all you do is hold down a direction on the stick, you use the jump button, and any of the buttons on the arcade panel or on your controller are going to do different tricks. And they are relatively accurate to real life snowboarding, a sport like I said I cannot participate in whatsoever, but I know a lot about. So it's just a great game to play. And it's one of those games that I do not hear mentioned much at all anymore. I don't even really hear Cool Borders mentioned on the Sony PlayStation, and that was a really popular game as well. These sort of games just haven't really been prevalent lately, and some of the more recent skiing and snowboarding games that have come out have just not been that much fun in my eyes because they're not as arcadey feeling as they should be. Because from start to finish, Steep Slope Sliders is 100% an arcade experience, that classic mid-90s arcade gameplay style that if you grew up with it, you know it and you crave it and you want to go back to it. I will say that this is one of the okay-ish looking Sega Saturn games. There's definitely some, distortion in the textures and some polygon breakup around. It's like quadrilateral breakup. That's a hard word to say. I just mangled that, but I'm leaving it in because it's funny. But it's not the most impressive thing you're going to see on the Saturn or the STV. But the game has a really nice soundtrack as well. So go ahead and listen for like 35-45 seconds and I'll come back and talk more about that one time Cave the Shmup people made 3D snowboarding game. But enjoy! soundtrack kind of sounds something like out of the Matrix, like they had an extra track sitting around, they decided to throw it into a video game, but it's definitely got that mid-90s musical vibe to it. And if you grew up around that era, you'll understand it. If you were not around when this game came out, that music might sound a little bit weird to you, and I don't blame you. Even today, it's a little bit not my favorite thing in the world, but it's still good for what's going on. It's got that 90s quote-unquote attitude going on. But I just really love the jumps and tricks in this game. They feel natural when you pull them off, and when you don't land something perfectly, or when you crash, you know that it's because you did something wrong, like trying to do a backflip off that rock there. Although the game does insist that rocks are jumps, trust me, they are not. I've spent more than my life than I'd like to admit building jumps in the backcountry and otherwise. Do not jump on rocks. It is not going to work out for you. You'll be very sorry. Public service announcement over. I just love this game though, it's just so much fun, and it brings me back, like I said earlier, to that time and place in the 90s when these sort of games existed. And these are the type of games that I want to see more of. I wish that there would just be a really good arcadey feeling skiing or snowboarding game that's come out that doesn't have that big open world vibe to it, because some of the more recent games just kind of felt like they gave you a giant mountain and didn't give you enough stuff to do. I like these courses that are designed with nice twists and turns, with natural feeling jumps that really give you a sense of progression. You'll see here that I do hit the wall sometimes. You need to be a little bit careful with the controls because they are digital, not analog, so you really need to pick your line relatively well to get down to the mountain in the time period set, because you'll see here that I definitely ran out of time, and that does happen sometimes. But the game is fun enough that it makes you want to instantaneously retry and figure out how to get to the bottom of the slope without running out of time. And that's what I love about games like this so much. You can experience the entirety of Steep Slope Sliders in under half an hour, so if you're looking for some really solid retro gaming fun but you've only got 20-30 minutes, this is the type of game that I always love playing. It's pick up and play, get better at it, and if you really want to sit there and play it for 3 hours and try to beat your high score, it's 100% going to give you a lot of content as well. Now, if there's one strike against the game, I would say it is the half-pipe level, because it just insists on you getting a certain amount of points and you just scrub speed constantly. Trying to actually keep an effective line down this half-pipe and carry your momentum into each consecutive jump does not feel natural whatsoever, and again, this is a subject in which I have an immense amount of experience with, weirdly. And this half-pipe is just gigantic and huge and way too long. There's never been one made that long in the history of skiing or snowboarding, including all the super pipes that we used to play around on. But it's still a fun level, and I love that dog balloon in the sky. And this is where you just basically have to spam different tricks that you know you can execute with a small amount of air so that you can add that number up as high as it can possibly go before the timer runs out or you get to the bottom of the half pipe. But yeah, that's Steep Slope Sliders. Not only is it a really fun and interesting arcade snowboarding game that came home to the Sega Saturn, it's also made by Cave, the same people that make Bullet Hell Shmups. This is one of their only games that is not in the shmup genre, so it's really interesting to look at from a historical standpoint as well. But if you did not grow up playing this, I highly recommend you take a look at it, because there's a lot of fun to be had here. If you have a few friends over and kind of compete on score, it will be a really good time. Short of that, I'll be back next Wednesday with more Sega STV content. I'll have videos for the week as well, but leave me a comment down below and tell me, have you ever played Steep Slope Sliders? Or is this the first time you're hearing about it? I will see you guys next time. Hit that goal sign. Bye-bye.